Welcome to the Transforming Trauma podcast. Transforming Trauma is presented by the Complex Trauma Training Center. I'm your host, Emily Ruth, and I'm so glad you've joined us today. We're excited to share with you about an upcoming special CTTC event hosted by Roots Transition in Park City, Utah. We hope you will join us in beautiful Park City on July 19th and 20th, 2024 for a weekend of learning and connection with NARM senior trainer Brad Kammer. On Friday night, Brad will present a free introduction to NARM workshop, delivering an engaging theoretical and clinical overview of the NARM approach to healing complex trauma. On Saturday, Brad will present a NARM demonstration workshop, providing a special opportunity to observe live NARM demonstrations and gain insights into the application of NARM principles and skills. In addition to the NARM workshops, Roots will be offering wellness experiences both Friday and Saturday. Please visit our website, complextraumatrainingcenter.com/events to learn more and to register. We look forward to this special opportunity to be together in Park City and to get a direct experience of the transformation possible with NARM. If you are hearing this after July 19th, 2024, check the link in the show notes for more upcoming events and opportunities to connect. And now for our episode. As a young adult, Cami Black knew that she wanted to be a therapist to address the trauma impacting so many and to help give back to a community that once served her. Cami completed both bachelor's and master's degrees in social work from the University of Utah, and over the past 20 years has worked with families who have desperately sought out-of-home treatment for their child after many failed attempts to do it alone. Cami has worked in various residential treatment centers in a variety of leadership roles, and is clinically trained in many trauma treatment modalities, including the NeuroAffective Relational Model. Cami founded Roots Transition, a program that supports adolescent females ages 15 to 18 and their families by blending elements of outdoor therapy and residential treatment in a home-like setting. I sat down with Cami to explore this important work that she is doing in the beautiful mountains of Utah. Please enjoy this conversation with Cami Black.
I am sitting here with Cami Black with Roots Transitions. Cami, welcome to Transforming Trauma.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited for this conversation. I've been waiting for it for a minute. And I always like to start our time together by asking what you would like our listeners to come away from this conversation with.
Oh, that's a tall question. I guess just some awareness of NARM and how it's influenced Roots and me as a professional and personally. Maybe that's a lot of a request, but I definitely fell in love with NARM probably, I don't know, it feels like it's been a lifetime, but maybe 5 years ago. And so it really feels like I'm trying to embody it as much as possible. And it informs a lot of how I show up with my staff and my clients. And so just kind of sharing, I guess.
Yeah, that sounds good. And for folks who maybe aren't as familiar with the work that you're doing, can you share a little bit about what Roots Transition is and about the work that you're doing and how that intersects with complex trauma?
I've actually been in the residential treatment world for probably 20 plus years in different capacities. And over those years of my training, I really kind of fell in love with just the concept of trauma and how it really informs behavior. And specifically with adolescents, that has been my wheelhouse and their families. And so I really wanted a model that would actually inform and be something that applied to both my parents and my clients and kind of encompass what all my training had kind of led me to believe, which was both a top-down, bottom-up approach, blending the two. I have training in like EMDR, Brainspotting, Somatic Experiencing. And when I found NARM about 5 years ago, I realized that it kind of married a lot of my training together into one place. And it really pushed on this concept of like a humanistic approach, which I felt like I was ready for and needed. I think through my years of working in residential, I kind of followed the curve, followed what other people were doing, followed what we knew. And I didn't feel super creative in that. And I think when I found NARM, I just really realized like maybe something that I had been missing out on and our industry, residential treatment, had been missing out on. And so I was really excited to just bring that into Roots. And so I give you that background because Roots is almost 3 years old. I really was excited to start my own thing, start my own process with what I really found to be helpful. And so Roots is a treatment center for adolescent girls and their families. And it's about a 6 to 9 month program. The clients live here full time. We have a school. We do a number of things, but really the focus is talking about developmental trauma, the maladaptive strategies that come out of that, and then how those really interplay with family dynamics. We have a strong emphasis on families and parents specifically. I have a therapist who does only work with the parents, and that gives them the context. It really creates a parallel process between them and their child, which if any of you have worked with adolescents know that you really have to target the whole family to get movement and change. And then that blended with obviously nature. We're in Park City, Utah. And so we have access to the beautiful mountains and outdoors. And there's just so much healing that can take place in that environment. So basically that's what Roots is. It's a place where people can come and do really great clinical work. We have an amazing team of professionals and get what they need to so they can go out and kind of live with their developmental trauma, live with the strategies and have agency and choice in that. Like, oh, here's that strategy again. Do I want to keep it around or do I want to do something different? And knowing what comes with that.
There are several pieces in there that I want to tug on and hear more about. I'm really, really excited. But if I could rewind just a little bit, one of the things that you said that immediately strikes me as different from what I know is maybe typical in residential treatment. So you're saying 6 to 9 months. And what is typical?
It's typically longer than that. It could be a year.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Residential treatment, maybe you're thinking of short-term treatment because those are usually 90 days.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
But one of the things that I realized in my years of working in this industry is just that we keep clients too long in containing and kind of really structuralizing their world for them. And then when we go to transition them, they really struggle and we don't include the families as much as we need to. And so when I was developing Roots, I really wanted to get in there and do really good intentional work and then get them back with their families. But 6 to 9 months has really proven to be like a sweet spot. Like you're able to get in there, get some movement, but then also focus on all of the strategies that are showing up for them as we talk about transition and getting them back with their families. I mean, the hope is that they do all return to their families and with newfound ways of being and different strategies available to them where a lot of them have been functioning out of trauma for so long, they're used to showing up in a certain way.
Okay. I love your saying, so you bring the family piece in earlier than maybe some treatments do, but overall it's shorter, but there's kind of that connection piece is dovetailing everything together.
Correct. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And earlier on, I think sometimes we get so afraid of the dysregulation that family systems can bring up in our clients that we avoid. We like the separation. Yeah. There's some goodness in the separation because everyone can settle. But my experience is that we create that separation far too long. And so we don't give the clients and the families enough practice before we're asking them to go back home. Yeah. So Roots really wants to give the practice earlier on so that there's an opportunity to shift patterns that maybe they've been living in for years.
I love that. I love that. And I'm appreciating, again, the forethought of like, we want to bring them together. I don't know how you're holding it, but I wonder if the dysregulation coming up, sounds like you kind of embrace it. Like, oh, here it is. Let's work with that. Like what's happening here in real time.
Yes. One of our cultural values at Roots is change is messy, embrace it.
I love it. Okay.
Because so many of us are like, oh, this is uncomfortable. I don't like this. But any of us who've experienced a transformative process, we know it's messy. It's not linear. And so sometimes it's in the dysregulation that we can create choice and agency for them to respond differently versus in the supportive environment. One of the things that I think is so valuable that NARM and Roots in a partnership I feel like we've been able to create is more agency and choice in a setting that feels like there's no agency or choice. A lot of these clients are coming here because their parents want them to, not necessarily because they're choosing it. And so in my consultation with Brad, we've done a lot of work around like, how do we create agency in what feels like a non-agency setting and with adolescents, because NARM really is a model primarily developed for adults. And so when I was consulting with Brad around adolescents, there was a lot of discussion around when they're still living in the lack of agency, how do you find agency? And so that's been a very empowering process to us as professionals and as well as just our clients that I think give space to truly be trauma informed. I think often we throw out that word like I'm a trauma informed program and really we lack agency. And so how do we increase agency for adolescents who don't feel like they have a lot of choice?
Yeah. So you're obviously working with adolescents and families. You mentioned how it sounds like it's really important, this family piece, that you're bringing the family in, and there's probably generational stuff happening. So do you name that when they're coming in? Do you name it as complex trauma? Are you doing some education initially? I'm just curious how you hold it from the very beginning.
We do very intentional workshops and intensives for our parents. We have our parents come independently of their child for a 2-day workshop, and then they come to other workshops where they are combined with their children and other families. But we actually use the NARM model on kind of the different strategies. So connection, attunement, trust, autonomy, love, and sexuality. And we give them that language and we educate them on how that might show up for them. And then we help them also understand how their children are showing up in their strategies and how those two interplay. It's not to box them into that strategy or label them, but it gives a context of like, oh, here's how I currently show up in this relationship. And here's how my child is showing up in relationships, because all of the developmental trauma will be pushed on in more intimate relationships, which a parent-child relationship is that. And so a lot of the strategies show up for them. So helping parents understand, oh, my child has a tendency to be more autonomy survival style. So they're looking for the boxes to check to accommodate my needs, but they actually aren't internalizing that. And they might be feeling resentful or, because often parents are like, I feel lied to by my child. And it's like, yeah, but is there space for them to have a differing opinion, to share a different value than you? Because if there isn't, they will submit. You're their caregiver. They want to stay in relationship with you. That's important. And if sharing their opposing value puts that at risk, they will choose not to. Giving parents that NARM language really helps them understand like, oh, this is where that came from for me, from my parents. This is the strategy that still shows up for me. And we call them maladaptive strategies in the work that we do, so that they can then go, what do I want to do with that? And that's where a lot of the choice and agency comes in. I could keep it around. I mean, a lot of our strategies work for us. That's why they're there. And in certain relationships, I may choose to not let it go. I may choose to keep it there because there's too much risk involved with letting it go. But in other more intimate relationships, or if I see that it's actually impacting my partner's strategy, maybe I don't want it around as much. So that's really like the education around developmental trauma for our clients and families.
That's beautiful. So Cami, I'm really curious if I can get a little personal. I always wonder when someone starts up a program like this and is doing this kind of work, that is depth work, and you're holding this kind of space. I just imagine you've had your own personal experience and something that has brought you to this field. And is that okay to talk about that? Can I ask you that question?
Well, it's a long story, but the short story is that I definitely engaged in my own healing and work as an adolescent and benefited from helping professionals that supported me. And I needed that at that time. And I don't think I knew it when I was asked to start Roots, but I think that I'd probably been dreaming of my own program for a long time. It's funny. I was approached to start Roots. Well, I didn't know it was Roots at the time, but start my own program. And they were like, do you have any ideas? And I'm like, well, actually, I have this book of 7. Which one would you like to hear? So I think not knowing, but just that I've always dreamt of really doing this for others and providing a space. And I really felt like I could do it. I felt like I could provide an environment that was very clinically savvy, that got movement in our clients that they wanted, and that I could meet them where they were at. And so I guess, yes, doing my own work definitely contributed to why I wanted to be here. But I also think, in addition to just having ideas, I also knew the team that I wanted to create. And I don't believe that anyone can do this work in a silo, that there is definitely a need for community. And so it was easy almost when I was like, oh, yes, I will do it. I say easy now because it's been 3 years. If you asked me right after, I wouldn't have said easy. But, in that way, it made it manageable. And so it's been like a really beautiful experience. And I think for me personally, when I was going through the NARM training, I really realized how my own strategy was showing up for me in my own life, both with my partner and with my children, and realizing that there were still things from my childhood that I was kind of reenacting, knowing that I am trust survival strategy, like that is my strategy, and that I don't often trust quickly, that I do a lot of things on my own, like I can do this myself. It's better. I don't have to trust anyone through that. And recognizing how that had contributed to maybe burnout or exhaustion in my own work. For me personally, I just really resonated with NARM and noticed things about myself that gave me a space to do some things a little differently and delegate. I mean, delegating for a trust survival style is like, oh my God, that's really scary. What if they mess it up? What if they don't do it right? And we will joke often as a leadership team because they know that about me. And so there's space for us to kind of laugh at our own strategies when they show up because we know where they're coming from and not that they're actually based in the present moment. Personally, that is really what led me here and shifted the way I wanted to be for my clients.
I'm just appreciating the spaciousness that you're giving the clinicians. We all are doing our work. We're all in this space. We're creating something where it's okay to kind of joke about our strategies, and it's okay. I'm just noticing that's coming up for me right now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that often if we're not aware of what's coming up for us as a therapist, as a helping professional, we don't know when we're actually doing a dance with our client survival strategies and we're kind of joining them in that or reinforcing a pattern for them that we're not all fully aware of, but that we're just kind of joining them in. And I think that was something I really resonated with NARM is if we're not aware of it, it's unintentionally happening for us regardless. And so how do we bring awareness? How do we allow a space for people to honor what's coming up for them in relationship to their clients so that they can not join them or shift how they're reacting or they're responding to their clients. So we use humor a lot at Roots. So there's a lot of laughter about our our strategies or what's showing up for us. But there's also a ton of compassion and care for I want everyone who interacts with Roots to have a healing experience, whether that's the guides, the maintenance man, the therapist, the families. I want people to feel like there wasn't this pressure to show up in a certain way that wasn't authentically theirs.
Before we pressed record, we were chatting just a little bit, and you mentioned something. I don't know if it's just your clinicians or the 50-50.
Yeah, we provide a meeting every month. It's part of our growth and development trainings for all of our staff. So this is offered to everyone. And we call it 50-50, which is a concept in NARM, but it's this idea that I will be aware enough of what's coming up for me in relationship to my client that I don't take on too much or overfunction for them or not allow me to be truly curious, that as I'm curious with myself and very aware of like, that's interesting. I'm feeling a lot of pressure when I meet with this client. I wonder what that's about. Just that curiosity for ourselves first allows us to provide a space for our clients to show up and be curious with themselves and not maybe overfunction or try to get our clients somewhere. I know I said that earlier in the podcast and I heard myself say it, but it really is not our job to get them somewhere. That actually doesn't come from a place of curiosity. So how do we partner with them? I'll use a lot of I want to partner with you as my client. What does that look like? Because that feels like 50-50. And so the idea is just being aware. Sometimes people call it countertransference or, whatever comes up for me inside of me in relationship to this client might be helpful information. It might be just something I'm noticing. But the more I'm aware of that, the less likely I am to kind of unintentionally reinforce a pattern for them or a strategy that's there for them. So we do this meeting every month in an effort to provide a space for both our guides, therapists, whoever wants to come to talk through gosh, what is it that's coming up for me right now? Often it's I feel inadequate, or I don't want to set boundaries with this certain client. I don't want to do that with this person. And they can also bring up personal experiences if some of that's coming up for them. And they can just be aware, notice, honor it, see where it's coming from them. Often it is related to something childhood or their family of origin. And then we talk a lot about the choice point. So what do you want to do? Maybe it's safe to keep that around. Maybe you want that strategy there with this client, or maybe you want to shift some of that. And what would that look like? So it's just kind of helping them process through what is coming up for them and acknowledging. I think it's so important to acknowledge that they have choices, because often our strategies come from a place where we don't have choice. We had to act that way, and it was very functional for us at that time. It was very functional for me to rely on myself as a child. I was the youngest of 6, and I had to figure a lot of things out on my own. And so there's that strategy did work for me as a child. In a working profession, when I need a team of people to run a program and to, so I don't drown in my own things, it doesn't make sense to rely on myself. And so just knowing when that flares up and when that doesn't, I think is so helpful to our team.
And I'm thinking, what a gift, not just professionally to the therapists and the clinicians that are working with you, but personally. I mean, I don't know what your experience was in your training, but I know mine. I thought I was showing up to a training to know how to work with clients. And I was like, wait a second, am I the first client here? What is this?
Yeah.
And so what a gift it is when we can lean into that, and that you're providing that space for them to be curious about it and not shut it down. Because I know there's so many grad programs, and I've heard all the stories of kind of being shamed by supervisors or, in their internship of oh no, we don't talk about that. If it's coming up for you, that's a problem. And I love how you're holding it, that it's no, we actually talk about it. We want to notice it.
Yes. And I mean, I had similar training. That's why I think when I found NARM, I was like, oh, wait, I can honor myself while honoring my clients. This is okay. There's space to not be embarrassed, not be ashamed of what's showing up for me, that it's actually useful information. That I think is so nuanced, and it's unique in how we're doing it at Roots, that it truly does feel good. It feels authentically good to who I am as a human. And then blending that with my program feels really nice. It feels really nice to show up differently in that way. And I truly believe often that's why it's such a high burnout profession. I believe that, because we're told to shut those things down. We can't have feelings show up for us. But how do you truly work on relationships with your clients if you can't be relational? Or you have to hide a part of yourself? They're in direct opposition of each other.
Yeah, you just highlighted that's such an important piece. They're in direct opposition of each other. So if we're not able to show up with our whole selves, and we're asking our clients to show up with their whole selves, they're going to feel into that. They're going to be wait a second, what are you, especially teens, because I think they sniff that out from a mile away.
Yeah.
I don't know. You're nodding your head. I think you're, with the teens that I work with, I feel like they could see right through some things. If I was not being honest or not really showing up authentically, they would know.
Well, and even in developmental trauma, it almost becomes a superpower for us to be hyper aware of our environment. And then you have a therapist who can't to honor what's going on inside of them, there's such a disconnect in that. So yeah, I mean, they sniff it out. They will tell you all the things sometimes you don't want to hear.
Yeah, sometimes the things you don't want to
you
hear.
saw that? I thought I had such a good poker face and I was fine at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, if we could sort of thread this piece into with parents, I think you mentioned you had kids, but the parents that you're working with, it all comes around full circle as they're learning, oh, it's okay to show up as my whole self as a parent. I mean, obviously, there's age appropriate things that we wouldn't maybe share with our children, but like showing up authentically as a human in that parent relationship with your child, how that can really influence in a positive direction their connection and their relationship with each other.
Right. I think for me personally, when I was going through the training, it did push on some maybe parental shame a little bit. Like, oh, what am I doing to my children? How is my own strategy creating strategies for them? And which, it's delicate. We don't want our parents to go into a big shame spiral and feel like it's all their fault. But I do think, I guess, and there is space for us to go, we all have a level of this. It's okay. I feel like we could also choose to normalize it and then not join each other in strategies that maybe are hurtful. If I know that my child has a tendency to want to know the list of things that they want from me so that they can please me, but really aren't feeling great about those decisions, I don't want to join them in that. And so it gives us space to step back or reflect. So yeah, I think the parenting piece is big and having your own children. It's a fun journey. They also will tell you all the things you don't want to hear about yourself.
Yes, that's
I'm like, oh, you saw that side of me? Shoot.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if you could share with us a little bit more about Roots. You kind of laid this foundation of they come in, you give them some education. What's the next place? You said you bring the parents in and the kids. What does that look like?
I want to back up just a little bit because before they ever get here, one of the things that we do, I think that's a bit unique in our industry, is that we actually interview our clients and we interview our parents. Partially to do the contracting process that NARM does so beautifully, like what is it that you actually want to work on? What are your goals? And there are times that parents' agenda for their child are very different than their child's agenda. That's where the fun family work comes in and all that stuff. But we do that as part of our process, which I think often kids are showing up to residential treatment with not knowing what they want to work on, maybe being dropped off by strangers, things like that. And that's just not our program. We want clients here who have a level of insight and a level of motivation and want to partner with us. So that's pretty important, as well as parents. There are times you will find parents who want to drop off their child to be fixed, and then they'll come back and pick them up. And that's just not Roots. Roots is like, nope, that's not how we do things here. It's okay if you want a program like that. There's other programs, but that's not us. So that interview process is really important to the setup and how we join them even before they get here. So we have that piece, and then they have family sessions every week virtually because most of the families don't live near us. Most of them are from out of state. And then they're having visits every month, basically, where either the parents are coming here or they're going home and really practicing what they're learning. So there's a ton of family involvement. They come to those workshops, like I said. They're going to Moab this weekend on a family trip. We really try to get them together as much as possible. And like we spoke about earlier, we're not afraid of the dysregulation that comes up in that. Like that gives us information. It tells us what's still showing up for them. And almost we want parents to embrace that and normalize that so they get really good at that, because that's what's going to happen when they have their child home with them full time. So there's a number of those. And then, as the clients progress through the process, many of them end up getting jobs in the local area. They get their phones back. There's a lot of privileges that are reintroduced while they're here with us, because we also want to work out the kinks in that. Like, do you tell your parents what you've done, or do you shy away from that because you're afraid of disappointing them, or any of those things? And so that gives it a lot of dialogue and practice for our families as well.
My brain is going in like 5 different directions right now. There's all these questions I want to ask, but I want to just check in with you. Like, what feels like the next thing you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think as far as Roots itself goes and the connection to NARM, I think that there is a lot of beautiful work going on with our clients and our families. And I think if we don't provide that similar space for our employees, how do we provide that environment for our clients? So I keep coming back to that concept that I know we talked about quite a bit, but I do think in awareness, there's space for more choices. And so just tapping into that curiosity, I know some of my training is around just trauma and where it lives in the brain. And I think the curiosity piece in NARM has been so valuable for me professionally and personally, but I think it's easy to assume we know what the answer is or what's right, and letting go of our agendas and being more curious with ourselves. Like, where does that come from? Am I feeling pressure from these parents to make their child better? Or am I feeling the pressure to push their child in a certain direction that I know they don't want to head? Granted, there are some safety restraints to that and making sure everybody's okay, but there is space to access their neocortex more often than we actually do. And I really believe like lack of choice, lack of agency puts them back in their trauma brain, where curiosity and choice invites their neocortex online. And I think there's a lot of beautiful things that happen when our neocortex is online and we're not functioning out of trauma brain.
I was just thinking about Brad talking about obviously our connection to our own hearts, our connection to the world, to the earth. Obviously, there's a nature outdoor therapy element of the work that you're doing. And I wonder if you see that intersecting with the NARM work. Like, how do you integrate those together?
Yeah. Well, I would say a lot of our outdoor engagement is, skills-based, building confidence, doing a lot of things like that. The majority of our clients up until this point have had some form of a wilderness stay before they come to us. And so that foundation of nature and being out and learning some of those skills out there, they come with, and there's a love for it that exists already before they get here, or a dislike. I mean, it's not all peaches, but they definitely have some connection to the wilderness. And then I think just slowing things down for them allows more connectedness to their heart and nature and, all those things. So often there is a slowdown that happens when we don't have a screen in front of us, or we don't have these things that take us disconnected. And so I would say that's primarily how we're using our outdoor engagement right now. And I mean, they have the NARM language, and so there's a lot of that going on for them. But I would say there's space for development to bring it more connected.
The slowing down, though, I mean, that's my experience when I'm in nature. I mean, I grew up in the desert, just running around barefoot. That was like most of my time. I was out with the earth. And, growing up, getting a job, sitting at a desk, when I'm back in nature, I can feel my internal rhythm slowing down. And some of these NARM concepts, I feel like I can connect with a little easier when I'm
for sure
in a nature setting. So I think you're already kind of integrating it just by way of they have that time outside. And that's really cool.
I know we often joke as a leadership team that really we created a program with all the things that we just love. So we're like, you should go hiking because that feels so good to us. You will like it too. So there is, I'm sitting at my desk right now talking to you with no shoes on. So I am bare feet as well. There's a bit of like, when you find that it's irresistible in some ways and you want to share it. So the nature piece is like, wow, we have these beautiful surroundings. We have access to nature. We're 5 minutes from the ski resorts. You can walk out our backyard and take a hike. There's a lot of that's available to us that the kids do find benefit in. They don't love it all. Like we want them to.
Maybe down the road they'll appreciate it.
Yeah, maybe one day they'll look back and go, oh, I remembered when that hike felt really good to me.
If someone's listening to this and they're thinking, oh, maybe this would be a good fit for our family, can you describe who would this be a good fit for?
So our age range is 15 to 18-year-olds, maybe having a history of some form of developmental trauma, which in my language that we just all do. But obviously they're at a place where they're desperate for support. They're desperate for help. Staying at home is not working for them. They're concerned about their child's safety, whatever behavior might be showing up for them, which I really conceptualize that as just a symptom of a deeper issue, like whether it be eating disorders or substance abuse or self-harm or any of those behaviors for me just feel like they're the symptom of a deeper issue, which often is developmental trauma. And so I think the outliers are the people that, aren't a good fit for Roots are just really more about like level of motivation. And if they're incredibly resistant to the process, like they don't have a level of insight, they don't have a level of motivation for change. Because I think for the NARM model to truly work, we do have to partner with them. Like, I can't be working harder than you. We really have to have that 50-50 available to us. Granted, even me as an adult, there's times that I'll cancel my own therapy sessions, because I don't want to do my own work. And so it's not that they can't have resistance, but just we want a level of insight and motivation to come to Roots because it truly is a unique experience. Like, it's shorter than what other residential treatments might be. We get them out of the house a lot. We partner with them, I think, differently. So it's an opportunity, and we want them to see that this is an opportunity, not just your parents are sending you away because you got in trouble. That's, I think that is essentially why, but I also need them to go, I don't really like where my life is heading either. So that's our client. And so as you can see, there's nothing like specific to a behavior because that feels like we're not honoring why they have that behavior. In order to honor why they have that behavior, we have to focus on what's underneath that.
Yeah.
So that's a Roots kid.
Okay.
So I would say the other, often we'll get referrals for more complex family systems. So maybe parents who also need a lot of support because we have the structure around that. It's available to them. So families who want to engage in their work, want to be a part of this process and know that they also need to change.
As we're moving to closing, do you have any like specific stories that you don't have to? But just curious.
That's a good question. Well, I would say just in general, what's most often showing up here is autonomy survival style. And I also think that's because of where we're getting them in their development, not necessarily because of a childhood trauma that then sometimes that they're connected, but often there's the conflict between having or expressing their needs in the face of their caregivers, which at the foundation of NARM, that is what is happening. Like often children shut down their own needs to accommodate their caregivers or to stay in relationship with their caregivers. So this adolescent timeframe is a very interesting one because you're actually looking for some individuation. You're looking for some separation. And I think when they have levels of developmental trauma, it's harder for them to accomplish that developmental task around separation. So either they're lying or people pleasing their parents, or they are defiant and, rebelling. So I think most often we're part of that process and really helping parents understand how they might be keeping their child from that really, really important developmental task of how do you hear what your child wants to say to you? Not necessarily that you have to agree and accept and accommodate, but that there's space for them to actually express it without fear of rejection, without the intense backlash, that they're afraid of. It's really beautiful when you can witness parents understand how they are playing that out with their child and really just like step aside and know that what is actually more valuable is that their child can start to express themselves authentically with them and they're receiving compassion and love in return. And, often if we look at this model as kind of developmental trauma and everybody has it, often the client's parents didn't receive that. Like they aren't skilled in that. They don't know how to join their child in that way. And so that's why I felt like it was so important to have a therapist specific just to parents so that they could learn that actually I have a choice in this. I don't have to do what my parents did with me. I can show up differently with my child. So in that way, I do feel like we're shifting some transgenerational trauma. At least that's my hope.
Cool. Yeah.
But
Yeah, that does sound really vital that the parents have their own support, because if they don't, I imagine it would just feel like a free fall. Like, oh, I'm supposed to change all these patterns. Now they've told me what I'm doing wrong, but what do I do instead? Who's going to walk me through that? So that just sounds really vital to that process. And what a gentle way to help. For me, I'm imagining it's like you're ushering them in to like a new season, a new relationship with their kids. And I'm just thinking of how scary that can be when we see the problems that we're enacting, or, that we're kind of passing down. Like, what was modeled for us isn't working. I know that's not working with my kids. So what do I do instead?
Well, and by the time we get parents and children at Roots, parents also have their own trauma around their child. So asking them to create space that feels scary, it can be really terrifying for parents. And so in some ways, getting them more regulated allows them to respond differently. But often parents are just as dysregulated as their children. They've learned to mask it or change it or show up, as they think they should. But internally, which, we talked about, these kids have a spidey sense or whatever you want to call it. Like, they sense that. They can see that in their parents. It's so important that parents start to address their own trauma around what they've been through with their children and, maybe how that reminds them of their childhood. And so it does feel like they're forced into their strategy that worked for them as a child. And so helping them see that there's actually agency in their space for them to be curious with themselves, and that allows space and curiosity for their child. It's really beautiful.
Cami, thank you so much. This has been so fun to talk about what it is that you're doing and that you're doing it in a different way. Thank you for the work that you're doing and all the NARM trickles that are going out into the world. It's super cool.
Yes, I love it. Well, thank you.
Where can folks find you if they're curious about this work and Roots? What's the website, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so rootstransition.com. I know it's not very creative, but that's our website.
No, it's a great URL.
Yeah, so you can go there and there's a link to our admissions. And, if you're curious, feel free to call and read about us and come see us. It's beautiful here right now.
Beautiful.
If you're ever in Park City and want to stop by, we'd be happy to have you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cami. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode. To find more information about our guest, check the show notes or visit us at complextraumatrainingcenter.com/transforming trauma. You can also connect with us in other ways. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We hope you're as excited as we are about the upcoming NARM event in Park City, Utah. Mark your calendars for July 19th and 20th, 2024, and join us for a weekend of learning and connection with NARM Senior Trainer Brad Kammer. We invite you to encounter NARM directly and deepen your experience of this revolutionary approach to healing. Reach out to us at admin@complextraumatrainingcenter.com with any questions, or visit complextraumatrainingcenter.com/events to register. We look forward to seeing you in July in Park City. If you are hearing this after July 19th, 2024, check the link in the show notes for more upcoming events and opportunities to connect. The Complex Trauma Training Center emphasizes professional development in support of personal growth. We provide clinical trainings, online webinars, ongoing consult groups, mentorship programs, and community events. Our mission is to provide a relational, inclusive, and depth-oriented professional community for those seeking a supportive network of therapists working with complex trauma. To learn more about our trainings, programs, and events, please visit us on our website at complextraumatrainingcenter.com. Thanks to Andrea Klunder and the Creative Imposter Studios for producing and editing, to Elisa Sponseller for our album art, and to Brad Kammer for the creation of this podcast. We look forward to building community and connection with you and changing the world by transforming trauma.